Dr. Mahoney,
Here.
Mr. Pipecorn,
Here, it's pronounced pepcorn.
Mr. Grinberg,
Here.
Mr. Judd, Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Ms. Carlson,
Here.
Mrs. Scherling,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
How are you?
Here.
Mr. Steen,
Here.
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Mr. Wayland,
Here.
Mr. Thorsted,
Here.
Mr. Olson.
Here.
Very
And we
good.
have a quorum present.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, please?
Hendrickson, so moved.
Nicely done.
Peterson, second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chairman Mahoney, this is Executive Director Paulsen. Upon suggestion by the Finance Committee, I would suggest that we move item 9C to consent agenda.
So with that in mind, we'd like approval of the agenda with 9C in the consent agenda. The rest of the agenda will stand as it is. Do I have a motion?
Steen moves.
Is there a second?
Second.
Campbell,
Carlson.
second.
Multiple seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
It's really fun to watch on the board as you guys each speak because you can see who's going to hop up there. Okay, Joel, you're up. Executive Director report. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Moved by Steen.
Second by Scherling.
And this would be a roll call vote, please. So, do you want to do the roll call vote, please?
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg,
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson, Mr. Hendrickson, Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mrs. Scherling,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Wayland,
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted,
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
So you're saying, you know, at the end, they're like, finally.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm back. I'm back. If you asked, it's yes. It's Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
We'll go to the Executive Director report. Joel, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of the board. I'll just do a brief update on the monthly activities from last month. And I'll first start with a review of the total project cost to date of $554 million. You can see our forecast year 2020 cost to date in the far right-hand column. We've expended a majority of our funds on lands and the lands program to date. And the second highest cost expenditure would be in the engineering, legal, and financial, and that's related to design of I-29 grade raise project and the P3 procurement. Paul, if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So some of the strategic initiatives that we're currently working on would be the consultant contracting savings, of course. We have some reductions to the PMC's contract due to COVID-19. As the board's aware, we have been working remotely And as such, we haven't had the overhead of travel and transportation costs for the PMC. The PMC has agreed to a reduction and a credit on their monthly invoices as a result of that. So that'll be some actual cost savings due to COVID-19. As far as internal diversion staffing, we continue to move forward with the hiring of the engineering director. We have two great candidates that we're going to be interviewing next week. The interview team is made up of Nathan Borboom, Matt Stamness, Jason Benson, Bob Zimmerman, and myself. And we're hoping to have a recommendation and the approval of a hire for July 1st for that important position. Another big issue for us right now is continuing to work through the P3 procurement. The next release of the P3 RFP Draft 5 is intended to be within about the middle of June, and John will talk to us a little bit more about that in a second. And with that, I'll take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from any board members? Hearing none, we'll go on to the core project update. Who's got that, Joel?
Is Terry Williams on?
Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Terry.
Great. So thanks to Paul for displaying the monthly update. This is Terry Williams with the Corps of Engineers. Diversion inlet structure construction. Nothing has really changed over the last month. The contractor continues to drive pile and will continue to do so over the next 30 days. And I believe there's some new drone footage to share of that site. Number 2, Wild Rice River construction. The contractor has been and will continue to, over the next 30 days, prepare the site and likely initiate some channel excavation as well. Number 3, Red River structure design. We are proceeding with the 65% review or design right now, which we'll have to the sponsors for review in October. The physical model down in Vicksburg is going to be back up and running by the 8th of June, and we'll use that to analyze a number of design alternatives and do further optimization of some of the structural features. Number 4, Southern Embankment SE1. We are entering the final stages of design on this piece. The 95% design will come to the sponsors for review on the 12th of June. Final plans and specs by the end of July, and the award of a construction contract will highly depend on the availability of lands to be able to build that project. Number 5, no change since last time. Reach SE2A design by Rock Island. Number 6, I-29 raise the 90% design review is scheduled to begin in June, towards the tail end of June, with final plans and specs by the end of September. Drain 27 wetland mitigation project, no real update. We're still on track to have a 35% design in August. And finally, Colonel Jansen and our folks here in St. Paul really want to thank the Diversion Authority for continuing to do the drone flights over the construction sites at the Diversion Inlet and the Wild Rice. Given COVID-19, our travel has been really restricted. And even when that starts lifting, not all of our team members are ever going to get the chance to visit actual construction. And it's really great that people can view progress. So a big thank you. With that, any questions?
Tony Grinberg has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Terry, it's been a couple months. Can you just comment, update for the DA, comments on budget schedule, and judging by your great report, doubt any of your contingencies been used yet, but maybe you could just provide an update from that perspective.
Right. We continue to provide biannual financial letters to the Diversion Authority, and We are within budget and definitely on schedule to execute the southern embankment work.
And then none of your contingency in your budget's been used then, I presume.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And was there another question I thought somebody else wanted on? Very good, Terry. Thank you very much for that report. I'm glad you guys are on schedule. We're always a little worried about that with the COVID going on, so it's great to hear that. General Counsel update, John Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one brief item that is a P3 schedule update with the COVID-19 issues that arose earlier this year and are continuing. The P3 procurement had to move into a virtual setting, and as a result, we need to make some schedule adjustments. I think our overarching goal was to ensure that the Diversion Authority had the ability to receive a bid before the upcoming legislative session. We developed a draft schedule, received input from the 3 proposer teams, and we're able to maintain that goal. Just in general, our next RFP release date is June 29th that was primarily due to the fact that all of our meetings, instead of being in person, have to be conducted virtually. And so there are some natural tendencies not to be as efficient as possible. And then our final RFP release date is now September 25th of this year. We are expecting the technical proposals, that's the solution and part of the bid, to come in on Wednesday, November 11th, with all of the financial details and the proposal for the bid component coming in on Friday, December 11th. And so that is consistent with staying on time for the upcoming legislative session. And it is also consistent with the ability of the teams to deliver within that schedule due to some of the inefficiencies that naturally occur because of having all meetings virtually. And I think the most interesting part about the dialogue that we've had is that the commercial and financial aspects can largely be conducted through the virtual setting. It's more challenging and more time consuming to have some of the technical issues resolved virtually because it isn't as conducive to the teams internally not being able to gather together their technical advisors and sit down in a room and go over proposed plans and specs. I can certainly answer any questions that you might have, but the schedule, we worked very hard to make sure the schedule delivered to the Diversion Authority bids by the end of the year, with the technical proposal being in before Thanksgiving. So.
Very good, John. Any questions? Then we go to public outreach. Rodger, are you here? Or does Rocky have it? Who has that?
Mayor Mahoney, this is
Rodger's here. Well, yeah, go ahead, Rocky. It'd be easier for you.
Mayor, I think Terry Williams set it up well. We do have 2 videos, they're each 2 minutes each, one of the inlet control structure and one of the Wild Rice River control structure. We're pretty excited. When we've had the original groundbreaking, we had quite a big ceremony. It got a little less for the Wild Rice River control structure, but they are doing a lot of activity down there south of town. If you haven't been there, we encourage you to drive by on the interstate. You can see it going on, but nothing shows it off like the drone footage. And so I'm going to attempt to share my screen here and show this. This should work if your connection is strong. We have noticed that if some people have slower connections, it's a little choppy. Happy to share these links with you afterwards as well, but this works for the majority of you. And Terry, if you're online and want to narrate your work, feel free.
Sure. So this is Terry. This is the Wild Rice site, and you've got 173rd on the right, I-29 on the left. And the location of the structure itself just popped up and then disappeared, but that's where the concrete structure will sit And then to the east and to the west, we will also be building dam embankment as part of this project. So right now, of course, you're looking south. And let's see, right about here, well, that's where the engineered channel would be. There's the contractor's staging area. As we fly north, 173rd is on the left. So as you can see, the contractor's done quite a bit of stripping, stockpiling of topsoil. They've also have built or are in the process of building what we call a flood control berm to protect the site if we do see high water in any of the springs that this construction will be ongoing. This will be a two-gated structure. There'll be the new river channel will be going from left to right, right about here, connecting the river bends. The structure will be built in the dry and then connected by building a new river channel. And the old river channel will just kind of act as drainage, and we'll keep that the way it is to hopefully maintain some habitat in that what will be a new oxbow.
Mayor, I think one of the main things we've heard from our work on the updating the communications plan and holding focus groups is that people still ask the number one question is this project ever going to be built? And I think legislatively, as they look at funding, they're asking what projects are shovel ready, and I think these go a long way to showing that we have work underway, people are employed, and project is going on despite COVID. And I'm going to try to share the other one here really quick. And so this would be the inlet and control structure, which you've seen before. Work is still progressing on it, and Terry can add some details. But I don't think there's anything that works quite like these drone footage. As Terry said with the Colonel's comments, we've also heard these from our congressional delegations and others that don't get a chance to visit the site. This is sort of a virtual tour, if you will, in this world we're in. So right now we're coming down what would be the channel looking southeast. So Horace would be right behind us in this picture, but Terry has anything else to add on the work going on?
Sure, the crane in the center is sitting where the concrete structure will be, plus the 3 gates. And now we're going northwest. You can see kind of off to the right where there's new gravel. That's where the control building is going to sit. There'll be a building that will house controls and other instrumentation for the site. You can see that they've driven sheet pile, driven H pile, and that right there is the stilling basin where the flows coming through the structure the energy will be dissipated. We'll have some dissipation blocks in that stilling basin area.
I'd like to add that these were shot just earlier this week, and I know in past we've tried to show you, the most up-to-date footage. There has been comments in the past, and we're going to do that on this as well. Try to add some additional educational information for when Terry's not available to narrate this, for the general public. And so we will be adding some other pop-up information on the structures. But this is, this week going on. So if you drove down there now, this is exactly what it would look like.
And Rocky, there's some people on the phone. Could you send the copy to that? I mean, Bernie Dardis would be really impressed with this, and sometimes he makes morning drives. He might go down and look at that. But just for the people on the phone, this is pretty impressive. So if we could send those out to them, I think that would be nice.
Will do. Thank you. Just one other quick public outreach update. Joel and I have been busy coordinating. Joel has a number of legislative items coming up. There's a North Dakota Water Coalition meeting tomorrow where there's a lot of talk on water funding these days with the Resources Trust Fund and oil revenues being low. There's also a Water Topics Overview Committee meeting next week, June 4th, that will take place, and that'll be a regular meeting that was supposed to be held in March, but was pushed back till now. So given those regular updates.
Thank you. Good job. Rodger, you want to say anything about farming right now, or your COVID outreach? You're away from us all the time?
Farming sucks.
Didn't quite expect you to be that honest with the group, but thank you. We'll go on to land management, Mary Scherling.
Thank you, Mayor. Land management met yesterday, and in your packet, I believe you have several different items that summarize the activity, which is a tremendous amount of activity going on. There's also a one-sheeter that has activities and achievements. Since last we met, there have been 5 new appraisals that have been approved, 10 acquisitions of parcels. We've sent out 100 formal offers. We've got 40 fully executed leases, and we are securing rights of entry. The BioGeo access agreement, we have secured 349 of the 375 and submitted the final draft to the North Dakota Office of State Engineer for the final mitigation plan. The ag risk study that we discussed last month has been completed and posted to the project website, and we've held a kickoff study for the crop insurance portion of this. And then finally, I will just turn it over to Eric to talk about the farmstead relocation plan. We did give a unanimous vote yesterday to support this plan and hope that this board does as well. It's something we've been working on for several years, and we think that this is a fair way to compensate our farmer businesses. It's a very, very difficult challenge to do this, and I think we've hit a good balance here. So Eric, do you want to take off?
Sure. Thanks, Mary, for the introduction. I am trying to share my screen. I expect many of you have this in front of you as well, but I'll scroll down to attachment 3 in the packet, which is related to this rural impact mitigation program. As Commissioner Scherling mentioned, we did preview this with the Land Committee last month and then asked them for their recommendation to this board yesterday. We also shared this with the Finance Committee yesterday and had quite a good discussion with the Finance Committee. And they also passed along a recommendation of more of a phased approach into this program. I'll get into that in a little bit more. Some of you have probably heard quite a bit about this, and so I'll try to give you a brief highlight. In your packet, there's the cover letter, and then subsequent to the cover letter is a 2-page document from our draft mitigation plan. And then following the 2-page document, there's a draft presentation that provides some of the same information, but in a little bit different format. We think that this rural impact mitigation program is important for us to properly acquire and reestablish farmsteads and rural businesses that may be impacted or displaced by the project. As you may be aware, we have an obligation because of the federal nature of the project to not only acquire properties via an appraisal, but also to provide relocation benefits to those properties. And most situations, if we have a home, for example, there are other homes on the market that could be suitable for the displaced residents to move into. But what we found in farmsteads and rural businesses, there's not a sufficient number, or there may not be a sufficient number of suitable replacement properties for those displaced farmsteads or businesses to move to. And so we find ourselves in a situation where the acquisition is going to be based on market value, which looks at depreciated value. And so if you have a farmstead where there's a bunch of grain bins and storage, barns and things that are very functional for the farm operator, but may not be appraised at a value high enough to replace those facilities. So we would, without this program, we would be putting those farmsteads and those businesses in a situation where it would be nearly impossible for them to reestablish their operation in a new location. And so we've looked high and low. We've looked at other programs, other projects in the area, how they've addressed these types of situations. We were able to find a program similar to this for a project in central Minnesota. It was actually developed by a group that is currently representing many of our property owners. And so we've learned some lessons from them. We've also learned some lessons along the way from some of the acquisitions that we have done in downtown Fargo area, as well as in the Oxbow area. And we've tried to take those lessons learned and put this program together. This program would essentially provide some financial assistance for replacing farmsteads and rural businesses. This would be on above and beyond the compensation for personal property or compensation for real property that they currently own. And this compensation would come in the form of a forgivable loan. I've spoken with Mr. Shockley about this a few times. He's got quite experience and positive experience using forgivable loans. Perhaps some of you are familiar with that. The idea is that we're using taxpayer dollars to incentivize these businesses to reestablish in the region, and we would all benefit by keeping those businesses in operation. Recognizing we're using taxpayer dollars for that, the idea is we would have a 10-year forgivable loan. For the first 5 years, it would be fixed at full value, and then in the remaining 5 years, it would decrease 20% per year, so that we trying to, again, encourage those businesses to stay in operation. Those loans, we understand, farm operations may change hands from a father to a son or other situations over time. And so we are suggesting that those loans would be transferable, provided that the new owner continues to operate the business. In order to help establish the amount of the loan, we look to tap into expertise from farm economy, farm experts. We've talked with experts from NDSU Extension. We may need to pull on some architects from time to time if there are unique situations, but we would be asking those specialists to help define what would be considered a functionally equivalent farmstead. And what I mean by that is perhaps you have a farmstead today that was added on to over 20, 30, 50 years, and they have a hodgepodge of grain bins. And if you were to go rebuild that today, it's likely you would build it differently, because farm technologies have changed and practices have changed. And so there would be a functional equivalent determined, and we would only pay for the equivalent. If the property owner wishes to put, make additional betterments, add more grain storage or whatever it might be, they're certainly welcome to do that, but those additional betterments would be the responsibility of the property owner. To date, we've identified roughly 24 properties that rural farmsteads and rural businesses that could be eligible for this program because they have some impacts by the project. I don't anticipate that all 24 will actually need to dip into this program. And so as you see on my cover letter there, I had suggested that for those 24 properties, if we look at what was budgeted for those properties and the potential to reestablish, or the potential need to reestablish those properties, I'm estimating a cost between $5 and $10 million above what was budgeted for specifically those properties. That's not to say that our entire lands program can't absorb this $5 to $10 million. Frankly, at this point, we have a bit of budget review that needs to be done once we have final determinations from the permitting agencies and we get through the DNR permit challenge. And so yesterday, the Finance Committee gave, yes.
Yes. What I'd like to do is I talked to Mary Scherling, and I'd like to keep this to the policy that they passed in land management, and we can get into the funding when we go into finance with Grenberg, okay?
Great.
So It's good that you're calling this item. I don't mind that part, but I'm just saying, when we finally get to the action item, what we'd like to do is accept this policy, and then when we go into finance, we'll talk about the financial issues.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I will pause there and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions from the group? Mary, do you want to speak to your group? You've been working on this about 2 years, haven't you?
Well, I think we've been working on this since day one. It's honestly been given a lot of angst to our landowners because they just simply don't know how they're going to be treated. And as Eric mentioned, you know, we have treated, I think, our businesses in Fargo fairly, and I think that we need to also extend that same relief to our farmers that are being affected. You know, it's not a perfect plan, but I think it's a good plan. And I fully support this. And I know when we talked yesterday, Rodger has also been engaged in this, and maybe Rodger would like to address it just because of his farm background as well.
Rodger, you ready?
Yeah, I would. You bet. I like this program. I think it definitely gives the farmer an opportunity to be made closer to whole, and gives him an opportunity to update the situation that he's in. Like Eric said, on grain bins, you know, things have changed. And if you're going to just rebuild what they have or move what they have to a new location, well, it just doesn't fit real well in today's farming world. And I think it's an opportunity for them to really also benefit by having the ability then to add on themselves to make their grain systems and their shops work better. So I think it's just a really good way to handle this. And I totally support it, along with the Cass County Joint Board. We've also reviewed this and support it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Questions? Can I have a motion, please?
This is Rodger. I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second by Campbell.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please. Good work by the land management team. Thank you.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Grimberg,
Wait a minute. Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Aye.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mrs. Scherling,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Whalen,
Yes.
Mr. Thorstad,
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Thank you.
It takes Mr. Olson longer to answer because he's further south. We'll go on to the Finance Committee. Can we have Tony Grinberg please tell us what's going on in finance?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it right over to Joel on the contract action item under HMG for explanation.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimberg. So we have one contracting action for board approval today. It is amendment for task order number 26, and this is in relation to the I-29 road raise. This is a part of the federal project in conjunction with the Southern Embankment. HMG has been retained by the Diversion Authority to perform design services in regards to the project. And so this is an amendment for additional design services. This is contained within the program budget, and it was anticipated. I reviewed the scope of work, and I'm recommending approval of the board.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
It's Chuck. I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Grinberg,
Aye.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Aye.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mrs. Scherling,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Wayland,
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted,
Yes.
Mr. Olson.
Yes.
Program budget status, Tony?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just provide a few comments and then turn it over to Martin Nicholson. Just as a brief update to the authority, there's been a considerable amount of time that's been going into this budget refresh. The good work of Mr. Shockley and the Whitfield loan, the whole finance committee approach to the project yesterday, had good debate on the former action on the farmstead issue. And, with a number of moving parts yet as we continue this journey to complete this project, there's still some areas that, we believe that are risk points that we'll deal with in a very proactive manner. And so the finance committee is going to continue to, put heavy scrutiny into anything new that comes into the project that's not in the budget. And so, we've kind of brought that to even more of a engagement level, if you will, because of COVID and just being more cautious in what we're approaching. And so good discussion yesterday. We've got a great team that has spent countless hours, and the future looks very positive in my opinion, but that also is going to have some challenges wrapped around it as we continue moving forward, which we will be able to manage this. So with that as kind of a background from yesterday's discussion, I turn it over to Martin to walk us through what the team has updated here.
Thank you, Tony. As Mr. Grinberg described, we worked with the PMC to complete a review of the cost incurred to date. And one of the important questions that is always part of the good due diligence that boards and finance committees such as yourselves do is to get a budget status refresh. And what you see on the screen is an evaluation of where we are today, basically through a cutoff date of December 2019, with respect to what was expected to be spent on the $2.75 billion budget. So as Joel pointed out earlier, the numbers are slightly greater now. This shows approximately $500 million spent to date. And at a macro level for the program is tracking approximately $5 million under that expected expenditure for the scope that's been executed to date. If you look at the line items, there are lots of pluses and minuses in the individual line items, largely driven by the cost savings that have already been talked about with respect to moving soft cost consultant contracts out of Jacob's contract under the program management, largely driving that negative, and then moving into other areas such as land acquisition, which is really the change in contract for A2S. So without getting into the details of line by line, I think this represents a good due diligence look at where are we compared to where we expected to be for the expenditures that have been on the program to date. So again, it's it's part of the due diligence to look at this, and it's one of the data points for what Mr. Grinberg was referencing about how to move forward. Similar to the question Mr. Grinberg asked Terry Williams at the Corps, there's a contingency budget that is a part of that 2.75, and that contingency budget you see there is about 256 million, and that is remains available for allocation in addition to the kinds of evaluations we're going to make on finalizing the finance plan and finance look once we get the largest piece of construction bid. Just in general comments, we have most of the construction yet to bid on the project, and so while this picture looks good at the moment, it's no time to rest on anyone's laurels. It's a good doctor checkup, but have to remain on the treadmill to make sure that this finishes as expected. So with that, I'll take questions or other comments.
Martin, just with that one on contingency, and the question I had for Terry, I think a substantial portion of that contingency is the core contingency in that 255 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. About 118 million of that is allocated to the federal component of the work, and the balance being allocated to the non-federal portion.
Any questions from the group? It's kind of a little surprising with all the elements moving around the world today that this came up this well. So congratulations on that good work. Tony, you have any other items in finance?
None today.
You did have one, I think you had one motion in your finance committee on how much money we'll play on the farmstead reestablishment. Wasn't there a constraint in the budget or how much you want to put in that at first?
Well, I think, the motion that passed under land management covers it. I don't know if we need another motion, but Eric covered, the main point of the discussion of this coming from the contingency, quite honestly, as well as, the up to amount. There was some discussion that, 5 to 10 million is a pretty broad range to approve. And so that's where the finance committee settled in up to 5 million for now. I know there's additional questions from some members from the finance committee that we need to, follow through on. And that would be kind of, my update on that request yesterday.
Okay, so there's no action item we need to do?
I would look to Mr. Shockley if that's required, but I don't believe so. Where we passed it under policy, and that's, moving forward in the future, we're going to have to be hand in glove between land management and finance, particularly with any budget requests above or land requests. But I'd look to John whether we need another motion or not.
Mr. Chair, at this time, given the nature of the motion and the direction to take a close look at the budget, we probably don't need a motion today. I'm sure there'll be a motion in the future regarding once we've had an opportunity to get some more information in regarding the actual budget, but probably nothing that needs to be done today.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Other businesses, we're going to court next month. I want everybody to be ready for that. I spent a couple hours preparing for the cross-examinations that are coming. So I thank everybody who's going to be part of this, and it's going to be a little clumsy because, again, we're doing virtual. But we'll try to assemble and get more details. Joel put out more details on that and what we do. The next meeting might be held in person. We have increased the ability of people to be in the chamber room to 40. So Joel and I will talk about that. If the COVID business is going well, we might go to a meeting in which we're distanced but in the same room. So that we will update you as the month goes by. I just want to make you aware of that in case some of you have other plans. Are there any other comments or questions? Well, I got to congratulate the group. You guys are being very, very expedient today. So, Any other business? Nope, no other business then. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Peterson motion. Or second.
And second, all those in favor say aye.
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 I just love it when we can all vote at some time, but thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for good work today. Appreciate it. We're dismissed.